Hello and welcome to Overcome a Mental Health Podcast. I'm very excited for today's guest, Danny Stevens. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. What's going on, man?
Okay. It's a pleasure having you. Most of you will know Danny from formerly of The Audition, and he actually does his solo stuff now. Is Danny Stevens. Danny, I just want this show to be yours, so I'm just going to give the microphone over to you.
Yeah, man. Like I said, thanks for having me. I appreciate you letting me come on. And I think, just to start off, I think mental health awareness is a noble avenue for you to take, my man. It's important. I suffer with mental illness, as I'm sure a lot of us do. Um, my family, everyone has a story about it, but yeah, I mean, as far as music relates to it, I think mental health and music are kind of always being a musician are always kind of at odds with one another, man. And I spent my all my 20s, my all of my 20s touring on the road and just nonstop doing music. And you know, when you're young and excited and all of these opportunities are coming your way, like just rapid fire, you kind of just lose a sense of what's going on. And like, you kind of, you, if you let yourself get lost, like you never really find out who you are as a person and as an individual. And I think like for a lot of us, once it started going away, um, a lot of us had these kind of like identity. I know I did. I had an identity crisis when the band was over. So I really leaned on alcohol, and that was my crutch. And it started while I was in the band, and it was touring and alcohol just go hand in hand. And I think once the band ended, as I said, that I had this identity crisis, and I was in Nashville and lost and just drunk, and I ended up getting sober in 2018, and I haven't had a drink since. And I really I sought therapy. I got put on SSRIs and anti-anxiety medication, and it happened to work for me. And I think the more we normalize it, the easier it will be for people to seek help that they need. And like I said, it's a noble cause that this is what you put your time into. So I'm just happy to be here, man. I appreciate you having me for real.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And be willing to be so open and come on and talk about your sobriety and addiction and all that stuff. It's not easy to be vulnerable. That's one thing I've figuring out while doing this. Like it took a lot for me to open up and say some of the things I've said, and hopefully I'm not hurting anybody's feelings by being honest about it.
Well, hey man, if it's the truth, and if you're just speaking it, then it's kind of on them. But there's a fine line between like being an asshole and telling the truth. Like,
Hmm.
there are a lot of people that aren't very nice to others get away with their ways just by saying, "Well, I'm just being honest," which isn't helpful, because it's there's something called tact, and people that are just honest in that way. I don't know. There's a difference, Um, but yeah, I mean, I I'm an open book when it comes to it because I know that people struggle with it, and it's funny. It's funny being in Nashville. Like I've had people reach out to me and how did you do it? What was your secret, for lack of a better term? And it's interesting how many of those people that like sought advice from me, and they're kind of still stuck in their ways. And
Hmm.
I think that's the addiction, right? It's not necessarily like homeless and like begging for change. It's a spectrum of addiction. And I'll just say this: I'm glad that I was able to escape it, because if I hadn't, I would not be very happy with myself. I can tell you that because I wasn't, and that was 7 years ago. So I can only imagine what I would be feeling like 7 years later, continuing down that road.
Yeah, and you are in an industry where like there's alcohol is pretty prevalent. Like how do you deal with that? Do you feel like triggered or anything like when you're around it?
No, I don't. I I never. I mean, once I make a decision on something and work my way through it. I mean, actually let me back up. I Nashville is very much surrounded around, revolved around alcohol. I mean, every meeting that you go to is either at a bar or a restaurant with alcohol. And, I mean, drinking will start at noon, at lunch. You're on a right at 10 a.m. and then all of a sudden it's noon. You go to lunch and people start drinking tequila, and then that's just it. That's the whole day. And then you don't stop a train. And there is a way to network, and that is kind of like the standard Nashville way to do it. And I did that for a long time, and I think the way that I went about getting sober is the reason that I don't get triggered by it now is because, dude, I like pulled back from everything in my life, except my music. I kind of like excommunicated myself from my whole network in Nashville, and it was really hard to do that, because those were the people that I was trying to build my career around and with. And I came to a point where I had to really choose if that was worth it over, really, I mean, just continuing to poison myself. And I made the decision that it wasn't worth it. And so like for like a year, dude, like I really just pulled back and like I didn't see anybody. I didn't do anything, man. Like I went to the bar a couple times. And I would give myself like a midnight curfew and be like, all right, dude, like if you're out here till midnight, that's it. You're going home because nothing good is happening at that time. So any conversation you may have or any type of networking you may do, it almost is irrelevant because you're the only one that's going to be taking it seriously. And that kind of just like the whole thing just kind of got old to me. And so yeah, I mean, I pulled myself back from it, and when I started making my new music, I've been slowly rebuilding that network with people outside of that realm, and it's been great. I've really met some awesome people that I'm glad that I work with, and and I've been meeting a lot of like-minded individuals as well as far as just the mental health and sobriety and I think that helps too, surrounding yourself with people that don't judge you for not drinking because people think that once you stop drinking, it almost, in my experience, when I would go to an event or anything and I would tell people that I quit drinking, you never heard people tell you how little they drink in their lives until you tell them that you're sober. Oh yeah, I cut back, I cut way back, you know, 2 weeks ago, and I've only been drinking this. It's like, dude, I don't give a shit how much you drink. I don't care, dude. Like, was a decision for me. Like, I don't judge you
Yeah,
for what you
yeah,
do because I
yeah.
am you.
What and that's hard to do though. Like it's like sounded like you did like a kind of a hard reset just to like revisit your
Good way to
surroundings
put
and
it.
make sure. Yeah. And what do you think was that like point for you to like realize you know what like I need help. I need to get rid of all this stuff.
Sorry about that. There were a couple points for me. There was a point where maybe the first point was, I was like 30 or like maybe 31 at the time, and it was my third time that week puking in the toilet because I drank too much. And I just remember because like I was the type of drinker that would drink until I threw up. Like I didn't really black out, I mean, things would get fuzzy sometimes, but not so much that I wasn't really like in control. And drinking and throwing up and then drinking, that was like what I did. So, but it came to a point where I was just like, damn, dude, like this is the third time this week you've done this. The second thing that made me really take a different look at myself was I was going to a friend's house that lived three doors down from me, and we had plans to jam. We had started like this 90s alternative band that we were writing songs that sounded like that, and we were just having fun and jamming. And and so I was going to go over there at 7:30. We had a bottle of whiskey that we were going to drink, and I had gotten home at 6 o'clock, so I had like an hour and a half till I had to be there. And man, I remember thinking, okay, how much booze do you have in the house right now so you can be drunk enough to go next door and drink that whiskey so when the whiskey's gone, you are at a amount of drunk that you want to be. And so I ended up drinking like four White Claws, and this was right when White Claws came out. So I mean, it was like the first thing on the market like that, and they were fucking delicious. So I was like, so I'm really glad that I got out of that game before like all the twisted teas and like all that crazy. Dude, there's just so much variety now. It's like they trap you with variety now. But I remember drinking four White Claws and like three glasses of wine in an hour and a half, dude. And I remember I was about to go and drinking the last glass of wine and like chugging it. And I put the glass down and like for the first time in my life, I had said out loud to myself, like, I said, holy shit, dude, you have a problem. You need to assess this and you need to take stock in your priorities and what matters. And then the last thing that really uh, solidified it was there was a night I was out on Broadway in Nashville and I had just rescued my dog Axel. And he who just passed this past year. So I got him 7 years ago. He was about 3 or 4 when I rescued him, and he was an owner surrender. And we didn't know where he came from. I didn't know like they didn't know anything about him at the shelter that I got him from, or the foster home. And I remember bringing him home and like putting him in his crate, and I left. And I mean, I was gone for hours, and I think I was on Broadway, like I said, and all of a sudden I remembered that he was home. And mind you, this is my first dog I'd ever had. I didn't have dogs growing up. I lived with a couple dogs, but like, they weren't my responsibility. It was hands off, like, hi, pet. And I wanted a dog because I was so lonely and I needed a companion. And, I was drinking so much. And when I remembered that he was home, I I called an Uber and like was just like sick, dude. And not like because I drank too much, just like sick to my stomach, thinking that I was so selfish to leave this poor animal alone for any more amount of time than he would be comfortable with. And I got home and I looked through the window of the front door at him, and he was just standing there with his ears poking out of the cage. And I walked in, man, and like I opened the cage and he just hugged me, and like I broke down. Like I had a total breakdown, and that was the moment. I was like, all right, man, like this is it. Like you really need to reassess what you're doing. And I set a date, and so this was in like no late November, like right before Thanksgiving of 2017. And I set a date for myself of January 1st, and not a New Year's resolution, but just like a date that like was easy to remember and I knew I would stick to. And it was close. And it was far enough away to where like I wasn't stopping in that moment. I was kind of leading myself to this moment that I saw the finish line, and I was like, all right, man, you're almost there. It was kind of that mentality. And I remember, man, I was at a New Year's Eve party at one of my good buddy Johnny McGuire's house, who's also an incredible writer and artist in Nashville. And I Everybody was in the backyard at a fire. And I walked in the house by myself and I grabbed a beer from the fridge. I sat on the couch alone. I ordered an Uber and I drank that thing. And that was it. That was it. I was done. I went home. I woke up hungover as hell the next morning. And, with Axel in my arms, dude. And, and that was it. No more drinking, dude. And I haven't had a sip since. And that was over 7 years ago now.
That's really cool, and it's crazy like what a dog can do for those types of situations.
Man,
I have a
go ahead.
I have a rescue dog myself. We
Yeah.
got him when he was probably about 16 weeks old. I don't know where he came from, um, but I was dealing with some bad anxiety issues, and I started training him. And he helped me overcome a lot of those. I never saw it like my wife did, but she's like, he helped you, like hands down.
Wow.
He really helped you.
That's awesome, man. I mean, I know the feeling. I get it. I mean, it's really cool to have something around you that is constantly just joyous. That is nothing but pure love. And I feel like the first time I ever understood unconditional love and like really actually got it was when I got Axel. And I remember a moment I was looking at him in his eyes and just like I felt it. I felt it. And it was like the first time that I got it. And then I think, and it's funny, I tell my wife like the only other time that I felt that was looking at her, and just
Yeah,
I put those two things together because it was just so like pure and different feeling, and it was like an understanding, and I credit him for like being for allowing me to be able to recognize that in somebody else.
that's awesome. Good stuff. And when you were like going through like your drinking and stuff, like did it affect your mental health at all?
Oh my God, yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, how could it not, right? I mean, the reason that you do it is because you're running from something, right? And it's not until you can kind of assess it and figure out what that is, you know, that it's funny because I like saw myself. I knew what I was doing. I knew that I was like fucking up, man. Like I knew it. And I was able to like I'm so lucky that I was able to like kind of almost get out of my own way and just be like, "Hey man, you have an issue and you need to stop doing this." And so many people don't get that. I don't want to call it privilege, but I made the decision for myself and I was lucky to be able to do that. Whereas so many people get forced into it. And that's when, that my dog just came in. Our other boy, he must know that we're talking about dogs. Dude, what are you doing?
They can sense it. They can sense it. I
Yeah, dude,
promise you.
he knows. Hold on, I'm gonna get him out of here real quick. Is that okay?
Yeah, you're totally good.
Give me 1 second. Get out of here, you goof. How'd you get in here? Go on, go get your mom. Now, get out of here. Okay. Sorry about that. Where was I?
No, no, you're good.
He's huge. He's a German Shepherd, so like if I let him in here, he would just destroy this whole thing I'm sitting on.
You're good.
But but yeah, I mean, I don't remember what exactly the point was, but I'm just glad that I was able to recognize the issue within myself and because looking back on it, nobody in my life ever really sat me down and was like, "Hey man, you might want to like think about what you're doing." And I don't know whether I'm grateful or I'm a little bit bitter about that
Yeah,
because like it really did make me choose and I had to be the one to make the decision for myself without any other outside opinion. It was just how I felt and what I felt.
yeah. And I personally think though that's a really good thing because like if it wasn't until I admitted that I had a problem like with mental health issues that I actually was willing to go out and connect with the resources that I needed to get better. And I
Absolutely.
mean,
That and
and I've been struggling for years, and that wasn't until the end of last year that I really got the therapy that I needed.
And it seems like I mean, you're doing a podcast on it now, so it must have like, helped and changed your mind significantly.
It gave me the motivation I think I needed to actually go on with the podcast. I've had the idea for a while, and I've
Really?
always
I
wanted to
mean,
do it. Yeah,
that's great, man. I probably 6 months after I got sober, maybe sooner. It might have been even like it might have been like 3 months, but a relatively short time after I got sober, I sought out therapy as well. And dude, and it was awesome. It was through a therapist that only works with musicians in Nashville. She specializes in mental health for musicians. And she worked on a sliding scale, which was huge for me because, musician, we're broke, dude. Like, like just that's just the way it is. That's the life I chose. So she would have a sliding scale. So I was able to get the therapy I needed for a price that I could actually afford because she was a musician herself that understood, how we operate and like how hard it is on us. And, you know, talked about identity crisis and, she helped me realize that not everything was all my fault all the time because I always thought it was. And that kind of clicked for me. And I saw her for a number of months and then, I graduated out of her program, as she called it. And it really, man, it really helped me. It really did. And I implore anybody who needs somebody to talk to do it.
yeah, yeah. I totally agree. And what do you think? Like nowadays, like what do you think is the biggest stigma in relationship to mental health?
I think it's a giant projection. I think people are just afraid to face themselves and they'll do and say anything that they can to deflect the attention and to break the mirror, that they're looking into. Because it's hard, man. It's hard to admit that you fucked up or that maybe you're not this perfect image that you think you are. And I don't know. I think that's a lot of the reason people don't like smoking weed too, is because it really makes you sit with yourself and it really makes you kind of come to terms with things. And the anxiety that people feel is really just them thinking about themselves, and it allows you to get into that space and like correct those things if you want to, within. And I think that freaks people out. And I think that's why people also, like I said, don't really love therapy because nobody likes talking about their shit, man. It's hard. It's hard to like
Yeah,
admit to anybody that you're not, this perfect person. It's hard. It sucks, because we're in a society that rewards that rewards, being perfect and having money and having status. And so of course, when somebody is thinking like, man, I don't feel like that at all. I feel worse than that. It's gonna be hard for them to want to talk about it with somebody else. But like, what else are you gonna do? You
yeah,
should,
yeah. We totally teach that. Like we can go through life without having anxiety or being depressed, and it's like no, it's not true. You just
right?
need to learn how to cope with everything.
We all feel it, dude. It's just what we label it or what we think it is, and how we want to deal with it. As I've kind of said earlier, I was put on SSRIs and one SSRI and an anti-anxiety medication. And the plan with my doctor at the time was to see if, because I was so depressed I was coming off alcohol and I was just like a wreck. And our plan was, all right, try this for a certain amount of time and see if that will kind of like kick, see if that will kind of kickstart your brain back to like firing on all cylinders. And we tried it for a while and I tried to get off of it and it didn't really work. So I went back on it. And then probably about, I want to say maybe a year ago or a little bit over a year ago, I talked with my doctor again and we came up with a plan to wean myself off. And over the course of like the next 6 months, I was able to successfully get off of the SSRI and the anti-anxiety medication, and I'm just freewheeling now, man. I'm just out here. I'm just out here
Nice.
with my looking at the sun. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Nice.
But that was just a decision that I made for myself. I think that because I wanted to see if I could, and I don't shame anybody for not taking that approach. I think that mental health medications are wonderful. I think they help so many people. They help me, man. So like it's just my path with them was different than maybe somebody else's.
Yeah. I personally myself had to wean myself off just because my body, for some reason, I always get like bad side effects with stuff.
Really?
So, so I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do it long term, but I found some like supplements, like some like dietary supplements per se, like that help like calm me down. So,
That's good.
but
Hey man, whatever helps,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah, exactly.
it
That's where
shouldn't
I'm at.
none of it should be stigmatized. Like I may be sober off of booze, but like I partake in cannabis heavily because you know, first of all, like we don't know what the hell is going on, man. You know what I mean? Like what the hell? What is this, right? So we got to have a little bit of fun, and if it's something that isn't destroying my life and draining my bank account and putting me into debt and can actually like open my mind, I'm all for it, man. I'm all for
Yeah,
natural ways of dealing with things. I think psilocybin and mushrooms are great for mental health. But, I haven't done the research myself, and dug into it, but on all accounts that I've heard, it's been very helpful for people. Yeah, I mean that's where I stand with it. I think whether it's you know a pill from big pharma or smoking weed, whatever helps you. I think that's important. And finding those things can be difficult. I've seen people that I care about deeply struggle trying to find the right thing that works for them, and it becomes a frustrating thing where like they just kind of just end up getting in their own way and just being like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like why can't I figure this out? And that's so tough to see. And but maybe maybe they'll find the thing that'll work for them eventually, and then it'll be all be good.
yeah. And I have a buddy, a good friend that has some mental health issues, and he swears by like gummies and
Really?
smoking weed, and he says that like it's the one time when he does it, like it's one time that he actually feels calm and happy, like stress
Yeah.
free.
Yeah. It has a funny way of doing that. It's funny that it's a natural thing that makes our bodies feel better.
Hmm.
You know? But it's true, man. Like if not for that, I first of all, life would be pretty boring, because it opens you up, man, and it makes you feel things that maybe you wouldn't, and makes you hear things, and that you just have a more critical awareness. I think a lot of times when you're smoking or eating edibles, and I enjoy that. I think it's obviously be safe with it, but have fun, and you don't have to get as high as you can every time, but like if it helps you to take a hit of your dab pen before you know, go do something, hit that pen, dude. That's gonna
Yeah.
help yourself. You know.
And isn't there like different mixes of like it though to like one specifically for calming, and then there's other stuff that you put it to like make you more high. And I've
They,
been,
they 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 claim that, but I think that's a lot of marketing. I'll tell you this: I've smoked for a long time, and it either gets me high or it gets me less high. I've never been like, if you gave me a blind test of marijuana and I smoked all of it, I would feel no different from either. I would just
yeah,
feel more or less of like the high, the THC, depending on the content of that. But like, and I've read up on like theories about that, like that sativa and indica are the two where indica is the downer, sativa is the upper, but because everything's been crossbred and hybrid for so long that there's no true indica or sativa, so it's all just a hybrid at this point. There's nothing. It's just all a mix. So I, but like flavor profiles are different in a lot of it, and like the way they smoke are different. So there are different characteristics to it. But like as far as how it makes you feel, personally, I've never felt that, but that's not to say that I'm right.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
I'm not going
makes
to
sense.
discredit somebody who feels the difference, just because I don't. But yeah, personally, I've never felt that.
Yeah, and I personally can't talk anything about it. I've never smoked, so I can't say
Yeah,
a word.
well,
I'm just curious, to be honest.
yeah. I mean, it's something that's definitely helped me. Um, and yeah, it's definitely not for everybody. And it's just like anything else. It's not for everybody, but for those of us that it helps, hell yeah. That's what I think.
So, like, since like recovering from alcoholism and stuff, how has your like life changed? Have you felt like just in general, like how have things changed for you?
I really feel like a different person. I feel like my pre-sobriety, so in my drunk days, it almost feels like a different person, and that it is a movie that like I know really well, but I can't really remember all the parts to that I hate. A movie that I don't like. So I think everything's different. My whole lifestyle changed, I got married, we live in Pegram, Tennessee on this big hill with nothing but nature surrounding us. Like we've found this peaceful little life that like my wife and I just love. And without me going through all of that craziness, because like it just feels like craziness. It's just confusion and like your brain is always on fire. And with that out of the way, I was able to start thinking clearly about things, just about life in general. And I've started appreciating things more. And when my wife and I first met, it was during COVID, and I had gone home to be with my parents, and we met on a dating app. And like 2 weeks later, we were hanging out, and but before that, we would call each other every night. And I remember looking up at the stars one night, and we're both from Detroit, and I'm on the phone, and it might have been right before I called her. I think I might have been smoking outside of my parents' house, and then I went and called her. But like, I specifically remember looking up at the stars and just like listening. And I never really done that. And I just listened to all these different bugs that I heard. And I counted like 10 different noises that I heard in this connection of sound that felt like to me like the Earth's brain's synapses firing, and just stuff like that. I was able to kind of just like I felt like when I was drinking, I was trying to perpetually move forward and go to the next thing and what's next and where can I go next and who can I see next and what can I drink next. And it was always, and when I was able to finally slow down and just take in these mundane kind of like things that we just take for granted, I guess. uh I don't know, it kind of just opened me up, man. It really, I got to see I was, for the first time, I was seeing the world in this different perspective that I wanted to explore more. And without the haziness of alcohol, I was able to, and like I never would have even had that thought had it not been to make the decision to give up the booze. So I think, kind of to answer your question again, everything changed, dude. Everything. Because I would not be where I am without that decision. I wouldn't have the music I have now because I got sober, uh, and that's when I decided, hey, I'm gonna give this another chance because, and I'm sure a lot of my drinking had to do with, I mean, I know it did, with like the band and how that went and how it went ended and it really like I said, man, identity crisis. It was real and I didn't know what I was doing. Um, but when I got sober, dude, I was so confident again, and I always felt like an imposter when I was in my band, and I no longer did, and I don't anymore. And I think that's kind of the best feeling, you know?
That's really cool. Hey, you're making music again.
Yeah,
I'm
man.
personally grateful for that. So
Thank you, man. I'm grateful for it too, honestly, man. I never, I never had any plans on going out on my own or doing a solo record or like,
yeah,
but I mean, why not, man? I had it in me, I have it in me. So why would I deprive myself of like something that I'm able to do still? And, in my opinion, do it well. And people like it. So it would be stupid for me not to do it. And it brings me happiness. It brings me joy. Like my wife and I, we connect on music on such a deep level. Like it, just from like, we grew up in the same music scene and being able to like share this with her now all these years later is like such a joy. So, without like the sobriety, man, I wouldn't have shit, dude. I'd probably be living with roommates on a fucking air mattress, drinking still, dude, and it would not be good. It would not be
yeah.
good.
It's crazy to me that like one life decision can just like turn things like just change everything so drastically.
180, dude. I hit the brakes and it just made sense for me to do it at that time. And like I knew that I had a bigger responsibility with Axel. I knew I owed it to myself. I didn't, and as most families do, I think there's a long line of addiction in my family, and I was able to see where that led, and that was not a place that I wanted to end up. And I mean, it was right there for me to see. I was looking at it. I knew, and and I just did it, man. I had to get out of it, and that path is different for everybody. For everybody, I was lucky to not have to go to like a rehabilitation center, or you know, I I, I really just kind of writhed in pain alone in my bed for 6 months every day, until like started feeling like a human again, and just kind of picked myself up and continued to try my best to like better my situation and myself.
Yeah. And it sounds like you just set that goal and you're like, I'm doing this no matter what. Like this is going to be me now.
Yeah. And I didn't know who that me would be, but I knew it was going to be a better version than the one was at the time. It had to be. I just was I was so like sick of myself, and just it just needed to happen.
So what do you think, like looking back or I guess think to the like present day, what do you think society can do better to help people that are suffering with addiction?
Number one, stop shoving it in our fucking faces all day long. Pardon my French. I know I cursed.
Nope. Nope, you're good.
Dude, how many alcohol, and I'll talk alcohol specifically, like how many alcohol commercials can they throw at us every day?
All
Why is
over.
that legal? And I always make mention to my wife. Every time we're watching television, I mean, if we're watching a 30-minute show and there's 3 blocks of commercials, there's at least 6 commercials about some type of medication. Dude, it's fucking outrageous, dude. And all these alcohol brands are just shoved down our throat. And like I said before, there's just so much variety that it there's a drink for everybody now, for everybody. Where it wasn't like that before. It was either disgusting beer, when we were growing up, it was either disgusting beer or like disgusting whiskey or vodka. There wasn't high noons and Trulies and all these like fancy wh- barrel whiskeys and all this. So I think it's just I think as Americans we're it's capitalism, man. So we're just trapped, and it's on us to decide whether or not we want to partake in what's being advertised to us, because it's all an addiction. Consumerism is an addiction in this country, and alcoholism is just, really at the core of it, consumerism, buying what you think is best for you, or like what you like the most. And I mean, it's hard to escape it. So like, what do you do? I mean, I don't know. I know that's your question, but
It,
but
it,
but like the
it,
fact that like you can't advertise for cigarettes or vapes or marijuana, but you can advertise for alcohol wherever you want is mind blowing to me. It makes no sense.
yeah, yeah, I agree. I'm on the same page with you. I was actually talking to a guy from another country a couple of weeks ago. He was kind of brought the same thing up with dealing with pharmaceuticals
Yep.
and how, like, he's like, in my country, it's illegal to advertise for pharmaceuticals on the TV, but you see it all over the United States.
Dude, I say that to my wife all the time. I'm like, how is this legal? How is this legal? Like, what are they advertising to us? They're advertising a pill for me to go ask my doctor about. What the hell? That's not a product. What is that? Like,
Yeah,
what kind of advertising is that? What That makes no sense to me. It's just almost like a reminder that the context of the subject matter is irrelevant. It's them in our faces all day long saying, "Hey, we're here," because what is something that government has tried to wrangle in for years is big pharma, and they just keep pushing the pedal down on us, and they're just and back to like SSRIs and stuff, like yeah, they are helpful, but I'm sure there's plenty of doctors out there that just prescribe shit just to prescribe shit, and are not qualified. Maybe you're not. I don't want to speak outside my range, but there's pay to play doctors out there, and it's just it's tough when it's such a corrupt system and there's so much money involved, and they will just do whatever they want. I mean, that's
yeah,
really that's really what it boils down to. They'll just do whatever they want for as long as they want until somebody stops them, and it's going to be harder every single day because they gain more power and more money day over day.
yep, yep.
So what do you
This is
do?
a whole other topic I could just go rant on for probably hours and hours.
Same,
Because
same, dude.
to me, it's like it's a legally um, organized cartel.
Yeah,
That's how they
absolutely.
run.
Absolutely. And those doctors, they get paid to prescribe certain drugs. Like that is insane. So like you may
Yeah.
not even need something and they're going to prescribe it for you just because
Yep.
maybe it'll work
No.
for something that you
It's like,
have.
here's a band-aid, slap, and
Yeah.
then here's another pill because you have a side effect, slap. Like,
Oh my God. Yeah, dude. Like I saw a commercial yesterday for, is your antidepressant not working how you'd like it to? Well, here, have this add-on, an antidepressant booster. It's like, oh my God, like maybe
yeah,
maybe just that antidepressant isn't working for you. Maybe you need to try something else and not add some other
and
thing.
not add to it. Yeah.
Like,
It goes back to what you said though. It sometimes it takes a little while to find the right antidepressant that works for you. So, like, I would not recommend slapping on another one.
no, definitely not, dude. And it also really helps to trust your doctor, because I trusted my doctor. I had been seeing her for years. So like so I really trusted her word with the plan that we had. And it just so happened that, she had my best interest in mind, and what we planned out happened to work for me, which, I feel fortunate, man, because like not a lot of people are able to have that guidance and have those resources at their disposal, and that within itself is a depressing thing that could lead somebody down a path that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have.
Yeah, it's very, very, very true. And I feel fortunate to like have a good people surrounding me to push me forward and keep me moving in the direction that I need to.
Yeah, support systems are huge, man. If you and it doesn't need to be a big one, it just needs to be it needs to be real.
Yeah, one or two people that I think you can talk to, and you have it.
Absolutely. And then that from there it grows, you know, if you let it.
So, what advice would you give like somebody that's struggling with mental health?
I would, I think if you realize that you are, that's already half the battle. And the other half is figuring out what to do about it. And by law, by you know, I think the thing that helps most people is finding someone to talk to. And that goes, you know, kind of back to the conversation about finding the right medications. You know, not every therapist that you see is going to be the right one. You know, therapists are regular people too, and they're just as fucked up as we are, man. And you know, that doesn't mean that the first one you see is going to be the right one. You could not vibe with that person at all, and it can be discouraging. But if you if you recognize it within yourself and you're willing to want to feel better, really, then it's worth it to commit yourself to that journey, as they say, you know, and not just give up because life can be very rewarding on the other side of depression and anxiety and things that block you from that other side. And once that veil is lifted, if you ask anybody that's gone through any type of, for lack of a better term, enlightenment, um, they'll tell you the same thing. It's all the same story on the other side. It's all the same story on both sides, man. It's down and out, and then it's better than ever. There is no middle ground, and those folks that can drink that way, or you know, I don't want to relay it back to drinking, but just from my personal experience, like that have the privilege of like only having a few drinks, they're the lucky ones. You know, they're the ones that like don't need help. But like most, no, I just see a lot of people that really need help and don't really know it. And but they do, you know, but they do.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like I see that too. It's like, what do you say to those people? Like, how do you let them know? Because sometimes I feel like it's not necessarily on me to let them know,
I think
but
it
at the
depends on
same
the
time,
relationship,
yeah,
depending on the relationship you have with that person, because you definitely don't want to be like some holier than thou kind of like you need to, you know, do what I say because that's what worked for me. But you know, words of encouragement are huge for people going through tough times, and just I think just being understanding and listening. You know, kind of to touch back on what we were talking about at the beginning. My first year of sobriety, like I would have people reach out to me, and I had a few people like come over and hang out with me all day because they didn't want to drink that day. And you know, I'm giving them advice and kind of like how I'm going through this process, and they're asking me questions, and you know, that whole you know charade lasted about 24 hours for them, and then it's back to the old way because well, maybe they weren't ready for it yet, and maybe my advice will stick with them, and maybe if they ever do get sober, that's the thing that you know one of the things that will help them kind of come to that conclusion. But you know, all we can do is just listen and maybe not try to fix it all the time, but just offer your best advice.
yeah. And I think that's the important thing is that you offered you the advice that you could give to try to get them out of that situation. But in the end, it's up to them whether they choose to take it or not, like choose to act upon it.
Yeah, and you can't like you know the old saying you can't lead you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Kind of the opposite of what we're talking about here, but 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 yeah, I mean, and no shame to them, man. That's just their path, and if they're happy, great. If they're not, you know, they know the answer. Why?
Hmm. Exactly.
We all know the answer. We just it's like I said, it's sometimes it's just hard to admit it, you know.
Mhm. And like I said before, I think that's just like the first step. I think it's just one of the things to get you going. And once you admit it, it's easier to do things.
And I think once you can admit it to other people, that's really when it starts to settle in, and like you're like, damn, I can, okay, I got this. I feel good about this now. And you know, going through like journeys like that, mental health or alcoholism or addiction, when you do get to the other side of it, it's like the best. It's the best.
Yeah, I can speak from experience. Like once I learned some of these techniques to like, you know, I have three young kids. Like I let me back up a little bit. I'm getting ahead of myself. So once I figured out heard some of the techniques like help with my anxiety or my depression, I get really anxious at night, especially putting three young kids to bed. There's just part of me, and I'm tired and fed up, and they're not listening. And so like just little things that like like you look around the room. They call it the 5 4 3 2 1 method. You look around the room. You look at like think of five things that you can see, uh, four things you can touch, three things. What was it? I get that's all dealing with the five senses. I forget the order,
Sure.
but it's like I'd start doing that and subconsciously realize like what, like I'm about to lose my shit. Like I need to calm down so I can be the best dad that I can be. And my wife's caught me like looking at things and like doing all this stuff. She's like, you're trying, you're catching it at least. I was like, yeah, I'm trying. Like I'm not trying to make it obvious, but it's like you do what you have to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means like I have to walk out of the room. But I will say that my point being, once you learn these techniques, you can overcome like anything that you're dealing with.
Yeah. I have a technique that's very similar to that. I used to have the hardest time falling asleep, man. Like I would just lay in bed and just lay there, dude. I'd be exhausted, but you know, when you're coming off of alcohol and like your body's just getting rid of all that and detoxing, like your mind for whatever reason just won't shut off, and it's just you're running through every bad decision you've ever made, and it's just horrible. And what my therapist taught me, very similar to what you're talking about, and I use this to this day, this technique, and this is 7 years later. Um, is I go through my senses. So what do I like? And I just run through them. What do I see? What do I smell? What do I taste? What do I hear? What do I feel? What do I see? What do I smell? What do I taste? What do I hear? What do I feel? And I usually have a sleep mask on, and I say, I see nothing but black. I smell nothing but the air. You know, I taste nothing but toothpaste. I hear nothing but the noise machine, and I feel cozy, or whatever that is. And then I run that back and run it back. And dude, usually like 2.5 times through, and I'm out. I'm dead asleep, and it works. It's awesome.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
actually actually told I told my dad to do that, and he started doing it, and it worked for him too.
It's amazing, like little things like that. Because before I went to therapy, I wouldn't say I could. I don't know. Part of me didn't believe in it, but I did. Like, does that make any sense at all? Like,
Sure,
I was like
yeah. I mean,
half there and half like I
I
didn't know
think
what
it's
to think
normal
of
to
it.
be
Yeah,
skeptical. Yeah, I think it's
yeah,
normal to be skeptical.
yeah. And then I started doing the stuff, and I was like, this is really working. Like, I
Well, it's like
can,
they say, like you got to put the work in to make it work.
yeah, yeah,
And it's true, man. And that's with anything in life, dude. Like if you want to be successful at something, you got to put the work in, dude. You can't just you can't, and music, and especially like you can't just rely on your talents and like your music to get you out anymore. Like you have to really work at it and really dedicate your life to it. You know, just like sobriety, just like mental health, like you dedicate part of your life to it.
yeah, exactly. Is there anything that we have not talked about that you want to bring up?
Man, I don't think so. Aside from the fact that my new album comes out March
Yeah,
26th. Better Than You
perfect.
Left Me, Danny Stevens. Yeah, it's
I
coming
was just
out,
gonna
man.
ask that you've read my mind.
I got it right here. I had CDs printed. How about that? When was the last time you saw one of these?
I have not seen one for a while, but I really actually missed the physical copy.
Dude, I have like a thank you section right here. I've got all the lyrics on this sheet. So like I went old school with it, man, you know? But yeah,
Nice. I love it.
it comes out March 26th, man. It'll be out on all the streaming platforms. My music is up there now, but it'll finally all be out and in sequence the way it was meant to be listened to.
Yeah. And how can people find you?
I just search my name, Danny Stevens, and I'm everywhere that the internet allows me to be, which is everywhere. So anywhere you can find somebody on the internet, man, I'm there. So
Yeah.
Danny Stevens, Spotify, Instagram, all the handles, just Danny Stevens, you'll find me.
All right. A few little like just kind of fun questions here. What music is rotating on your playlist right now?
I love this band called the Teskey Brothers. They're a duo of brothers from Australia. I'm a huge fan of Motown, and they are like the second coming of Otis Redding, man. I mean, they are incredible, and they're somebody that I throw on quite often. I've got a friend in town named Sean Kennedy that just released his first full length album that is absolutely incredible. It's like 80s inspired indie rock, very, very cool stuff. And then I listen to a lot of music marketing podcasts. So those are like
Oh,
my
nice.
that's my
That's your
rotation.
thing, yeah.
And I listen to the local Nashville WNRP. It's like our local radio station. It's a NPR radio station. So it's a publicly funded radio station, and it's all like up and coming indie artists that are on the verge of whatever genre they're in, but they do all sorts of really cool shows and nights, and it's always a cool listen to that too.
Awesome. It's really cool. And I'm still like stoked that you have the physical copy too that
Yeah,
you're
dude.
sending to
Yeah, yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, let's see. I'm trying to think if I had anything else. One question, and this is just because I'm curious. Coming from kind of an emo, like the pop punk scene, do you like listen to that type of music at all? Like, or were you just kind of part of the scene? Like, I'm honestly just really curious because like I've
That's a
heard
good
like different
question.
like I've heard like different varieties of that of an answer. Some people are like, no, I don't listen to it, and others like, yeah, I indulge in it once in a while. But
What do you think? I'll leave it up to you. What do you think? And then I'll tell you the answer.
I'd say yes to some degree.
Okay. I think it's a layered question. So I was introduced to the genre in like 2000, and from 2000 to 2004, it was all I listened to. Everything that I could get my hands on, I had. I had rare bands from California, demos on CD. I don't even know how I had them. And the local scene in Detroit was so incredible that like everybody was putting out all this great music. So, uh, sorry, I thought the door opened again. I totally lost my train of thought. What was it? Oh, do I listen to the genre? So up until I started touring really joined the audition and we started writing for the first record is when I really stopped, like a hard stop on the genre. And I let it influence me substantially on the first record. But I think by the time the second album came out, I hadn't listened to literally anything that came out really past 2004. Even like New Found Glory is one of my favorite bands, but even like their Catalyst album, which I believe was released in '04, I wasn't really even fucking with that. I was already kind of getting back into like Motown roots, and I was finding country music again. And I was really loving R&B. There's a bunch of R&B artists that I was introduced to on the road, and so I really started digging into all these different musics that I had never been exposed to because I'm touring with all these people and they all have different iPods, and I'm going through their iTunes and like I'm taking stuff from them, and all these different artists and singers, and I'm just like collecting all this music on my iPad or on my iPod. And I think you can hear that in Champion. I think you can really hear a distinct difference in my writing and my vocal stylings from the first two records. And I really think that's when I found my voice was that stint of touring. And I learned the singer that I was, and I was listening to all this different music, and but to answer your question like fully, I still go back and like will listen to the Starting Line and Under Oath and uh Newfound Glory and some of the old Alkaline Trio stuff, because it's just nostalgic for me at this
Yeah.
point, you know,
Yeah.
and kind of just like everybody else. But when I was active in the band, I was not listening to that. The only bands that I was probably listening to still were like Jimmy Eat World, who were not really in part of our scene. They were outside of it. They were popular. They were a big band. I listened to them. I loved Head Automatica. Um, I really liked Jack's Mannequin, uh, but that was kind of after we toured with them that I really gained an appreciation for them. Um, but that would happen too, where I'd be on the road with somebody and be like, "Oh wow, I really like this artist
Yeah.
who I'd never really even heard of," and then I'll watch them every night and then start listening to them after we toured with them. Dangerous Summer was one of those bands where like I never really listened to them, and then I saw them play every night. I was just blown away, and then immediately I was a fan after that. So and nowadays I kind of it's just a mix of everything, you know, and
Yeah.
and it's because it's so easily accessible with Spotify that
Hmm.
it almost is discouraging. Like there's so many
Yeah.
options.
Yeah.
It's just like
It really is it really gets to that point where there's so many options that I don't even know what to listen to.
right, and it's like
For me, it depends on my mood. Like, and I've never stopped like looking up new music.
yeah, for
Like,
sure.
I
Same.
love it. It's and I'll listen to a little bit of everything. So
Yeah, same.
from country
That's
to metalcore to
yeah. If it's good, it's good,
well,
right?
yeah, yep, exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you for humoring me with that. I was just totally curious. You know, and that's all the questions I have. So,
Thank you so
everybody,
much for having me on, man.
yeah, thanks for coming. Everybody, go put March 26th up on your calendars so you can go to Apple iTunes or anywhere that you can and buy Danny's album.
Anyway, Danny
I've
Stevens better than he
heard
left me.
I've heard every single song and I'm totally impressed.
Thank you,
And
man. I appreciate that.
that's not just me being a little fangirl. Like that's me being sincere.
Thank you. It means a lot. Thank you for real.
So, and to all those that listen, thanks for listening to Overcome, a mental health podcast. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube at Overcome Pod. The best thing you can do for us right now is follow, share, like, get our content out there is the best you can. It'd be really helpful. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.